Candidates do not know. So, first question. How do you view the link between transportation and land use? What land use changes should we be making to help meet our transportation goals? And Bob will be answering first.
Yeah, well, of course, housing and land and transportation are inextricably tied. They're really opposite sides of the same coin. Our goal has been, for as long as Aaron and I have served on, and probably long before that, our goal has been to get people who work in Boulder to be able to live in Boulder, right? Housing affordability is our number one objective here. And whether that's for low-income housing or middle-income housing, people making various income levels, is to get them into town, because when they're not in town, they have to live someplace else that maybe is a little bit more affordable, which means they often are driving into town. And that's bad for a whole lot of reasons. Number one, it's bad for the environment. It's bad for them personally because they're spending extra hours on the road and away from their families or their jobs. And they don't have the benefit that many of us who live in Boulder have, with this beautiful town and our wonderful schools. And so we continue to try to create as much affordable housing as we possibly can in Boulder. One of the myths in Boulder is that there's no more room, there's no more place for housing. That's bullshit. There's lots and lots of space for housing. It is bullshit. There's lots of spaces for creating housing, whether there's duplexes, triplexes, whether they're ADUs, whether they're co-ops, whether there's lots and lots of ways. Plus we have the whole Area 3 Planning Reserve, which is 600 acres northeast of town, which we haven't even touched yet. And so we have lots and lots of space to create housing for the people who work here but can't afford to live here. And when they can work, live where they work, or near where they work, they're much more faster to need to drive, and they can walk or bike to work or take a bus to work. And that is our goal, is to continue to drive that. And so housing and transportation really go hand in hand. There's a lot more we can talk about as far as parking, those crazy parking minimums we have, which we always waive, but those are stupid. There's lots and lots of transportation factors that tie into housing. I'll stop talking now before I get dinged. From over here, and she's going to have some great ideas. We're going this way, or Nicole's going to have great ideas. It's over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you for this question. Such an important one. And one of the things that's been really fun about being on this council in particular is that we can all agree on the need for more housing in our city. And so we actually have made a lot of progress on many of our housing goals, because it's a place where all of us are aligning. We've done things like eliminating the saturation limit for building accessory dwelling units, so that was wonderful. We have allowed for a little bit more density. Actually, just the other day, my time is getting blended at this point in campaign and council season, but we allowed for duplexes and triplexes to be built on some of the single-family lots. And I think more of these types of changes is going to help us get to where we want to go. One of the most fun things that I got to do being on council was to approve the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. Now, this is a beautiful plan for really bringing in transportation that isn't car-centric into a new community with housing, with a plan for some businesses and services and industrial use to be there as well. So I think as we are able to do more of those kinds of plans where we're really thinking about setting up a different city. Our city was built up for cars and around cars. And as we move forward, the more we can start thinking about alternatives to cars and building car-light or car-free communities, the better off we're going to be in meeting some of our transportation goals. Also, one of the things that I think is really critical for us to be thinking about is how we're moving toward more of a circular economy, because a lot of the transportation that comes into our city is things that we buy, also bringing us things. And so how do we start incentivizing and creating more opportunities for local businesses? How are we providing subsidies for more farmers who are wanting to grow local food? The more that we can start doing locally with some of the land that we have, the better we'll be. Thank you.
So I love this question, because this has been at the nexus of the work that I've done on City Council for the last 8 years, is how do we move forward to a more sustainable urban form? Right, where we have the transit and the bike infrastructure and the pedestrian infrastructure, and it matches our land use, so that we have denser developments where we have the transit and the bikeability, and we stay away from densifying areas that are far away from those services and those transit. So I've advocated for this at every step of the way, along the way, and we've made progress over the years, right? So Nicole mentioned the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. This is actually really exciting. It's going to allow for 5,000 additional housing units in the east part of town that currently has zero, literally zero housing. And to do so in a more sustainable way, where it's mixed in with services, with restaurants, with retail, and things like this, and all near the Highway 7 Arapahoe corridor, the jump corridor. And State Highway 7, we're actually in the middle of this long initiative to build bus rapid transit along State Highway 7. It's coming along really well as well. So that corridor is going to be moving in a more transit-oriented direction too. And then just recently, we adopted an update to the Transit Village Area Plan, the Boulder Junction Plan, Phase 2, just to the east of us across the railroad tracks. And that's going to allow, again, for these vibrant, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods, plenty of additional housing, and lots of affordable housing near transit. This is the sustainable future that we need. Couple that with parking reductions, or as I would prefer, parking maximums instead of parking minimums, right? And then we get to the sustainable urban form that this century demands of us from a climate perspective and from a living perspective. Like, what's a good way for human beings to live? It's to live together in community and where you can meet your needs near where you live and work. So this is the project that we're embarking on, and let's keep at it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question. Nicole will be starting. Question is, how do you feel about e-bikes on open space shared use paths and open space mountain park cycling trails? Would you support or oppose on either or both?
Thank you. So I did get the opportunity to support this just relatively recently on some of our trails. I really actually like the idea of allowing e-bikes on our trails that are currently designated as trails for bikes. And part of the reason for that is that not everybody is able to get out and enjoy our open space in some of our trails. If they have physical limitations that prevent them from being able to ride a bike that is not an e-bike. And the e-bike can provide just that little bit of boost to help people get out there and enjoy more of our spaces so that our spaces become more accessible to a broader range of people. To me, this is an especially important thing for us to be thinking about, because over the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to be seeing a big demographic shift in our community. We're going to be seeing lower growth rates than we've seen for the last 30 or 40 years, and the population that's going to grow the most is the 65 and older population. So as we are thinking about setting up a community that is going to work for the people who are going to live here in the next 20 to 30 years, thinking about how we are supplementing people's ability to use some of our outdoor spaces becomes really critically important. So I am a fan of that. I think sometimes we need to think a little bit about how people are riding, because it can be really scary. I think especially if you are somebody who's maybe not as steady on your feet or something like that, it can be a little terrifying to have an e-bike speeding by you. So I think that there are some things we need to think about in terms of how we're reducing conflicts on the trails as more people do get access to e-bikes. And I look forward to having some of those conversations as we continue forward, hopefully with a lot of help from TAB, our Transportation Advisory Board, and folks in the community who can help us think about this. But to me, this is something that we need to be working toward. It's just a matter of figuring out what are the constraints around it that make it a good experience for everybody out there. Thank you.
Well, foolishly, I already talked about this in a previous answer. So if you didn't hear me before, yes, I'm a big supporter of this initiative. Was excited that it came forward and supported it at each step of the way. For, as I mentioned before, it's for recreation purposes, and that a lot of that is about ability, right? Is introducing these options for people with different ability levels. But also for the transportation to the recreation. And as part of us being a more climate-friendly society is to make it doable for people to do all of their daily activities, including recreation, without the use of fossil fuels, right? So being able to take an e-bike to your trail and an e-bike on your trail, or whether it's hiking, regardless of how it works out, that's so important for overall sustainability goals. There was one other trail, since I got the floor here, that I'll mention that I worked on. The staff proposal included the Boulder Canyon trail, which I was very excited. I remember the first time after I got my e-bike and I biked up Boulder Canyon and I got to the line that says no e-bikes allowed. But now they are, so that's very cool. But we also added Chapman Drive to the list of trails that are included. So you can bike up Boulder Canyon and then bike up Chapman, and then if you're up for that kind of thing, bike on down Flagstaff and do a loop. You can dodge the cars. So anyway, so things like that, I think, move us in a positive direction. I've been very supportive and will continue to do so in the future. Thank you.
Well, I'll keep it short. The answer is yes.
Well, thanks for getting me off guard there, Bob. The final question, but first I have a question for you. Are you hungry? Have you tried a burrito? Have you tried an empanada? Or are you thirsty? Have you tried a beer or a non-alcoholic beverage? You have the opportunity now. The last question, the last question before the audience questions. Do you support or oppose the Safe Zones for Kids initiative, which would prioritize keeping areas around schools and along multi-use paths and underpasses free of encampments? Please state your reason. I believe we're on the air.
Well, of course, fundamentally, I support the intent behind that, which is keeping kids safe and the schools safe. I do believe that this ballot initiative is not the best way of approaching that, and let me tell you why. So earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, the city got behind somewhat in terms of working on problematic encampments around Boulder High. And there were a couple of propane tank explosions, which were really scary, right? Because they were right near the practice fields over there. And so the city updated its protocols at that time. So since then, propane tanks have been confiscated on site. And the areas around schools have been highly prioritized to make sure that there are no unsafe encampments around schools in the city. The city has also taken additional steps to keep our underpasses clear, right? Because if you're coming into an underpass and it's dark and there's somebody right in the middle of the underpass, it's very dangerous for you and for the person in the middle of the path. So we now require people to move out of the way of multi-use paths immediately. The issue that I have with the Safe Zones measure is that it prioritizes near schools, which is good. We do that already, but also within 50 feet of all multi-use paths and all sidewalks. That's a really high percentage of the city. So it wouldn't have any positive impact in terms of the areas around schools because that's already where we're focusing, but it has the potential to dilute our focus around keeping kids safe because it would include areas all over the city that currently aren't priority areas because they're not danger zones for people in particular. So I appreciate the intention behind it, but I think from a policy perspective, it doesn't work out, and I therefore am not supporting it. Thanks.
Well, we've agreed way too much tonight, so let's disagree on something. I actually do support Safe Zones for Kids. It's not a solution to homelessness. It does not increase our funding for encampment cleanups. But what it does do is it prioritizes areas near schools above other areas. Currently, our encampment cleanup crew, the city staff, has a 110-point scale. They score things based on number of tents and whether there's violence and whether there's needles presence and whether it's near a school and a whole bunch of things. And they add it all up on a 110-point scale, and they say, we're gonna clear the areas with the highest point totals first, and then we'll work our way down through. And they never made the list, by the way. Schools get 20 points. Unfortunately, that 20 points is in a 3 or 4 way tie with a whole bunch of other things get 20 points. So schools are not prioritized, they're tied for first. So if you've ever run a race, you know that you can't have a tie for first. Somebody has to come in first. So this is about prioritizing cleanups near schools. That's all it is. It's not a solution to homelessness. It's not an increase in funding. It's just to say, hey guys, when you're cleaning up, let's do the schools first. Why? Because our children are the most vulnerable residents that we have in this community. And they have to go to school. They're required by law to go to school. So we're saying to these little 12 and 13 and 15-year-old kids, go to school. And don't worry about all the inappropriate behavior, the illegal behavior, the dangerous behavior, the threatening behavior that you have to walk past to get to school. Toughen up. Buck up, Buttercup. Well, I don't think that's right. I think that we should protect our children first. Now, this is not going to be a solution to homelessness, and we have a lot of work to do around that. We probably won't talk about that tonight. But I think the very least we can do is to protect our children so that they're safe when they're learning how to be young adults. Thank you.
Thanks. So I, as a parent of a 13 and a 16-year-old, I really feel for the situation that our kids are in right now. Many of the kids inside the schools are not safe from bullying, from discrimination, from gun violence. It's something that kids at Boulder High have had to deal with some scares there as well. They're also facing a really uncertain future with the climate crisis, and so it's really no wonder that mental health issues are starting to skyrocket in our kids. So when I think about them also having to deal then with exploding paintings and things like that in their school, it's just another layer of things that they really should not be having to deal with right now. Having said that, I oppose the safe zones for school ballot measure, largely because we already do prioritize schools. This year, we doubled the amount of money that we're spending on encampment removals. We now have 2 encampment removal teams that are out there removing encampments. More encampment removals, more kind of focus on trying to clear spaces out is not necessarily going to help improve the situation in our school, because more people are falling into homelessness every day due to rising housing costs and economic insecurity. And so for me, it's not anything that does anything, and I don't want our community to be thinking that this measure is going to change the situation, because it won't. We already prioritize schools. We're already spending more and more money every year on encampment removals. This is not the solution to ending the encampments that we have. We did put up cameras recently. Erin alluded to this on our paths. And that is helping our utilities team notice when there's a blockage in one of the bike paths and hopefully get it out of the way a little bit faster. So I think some of those solutions can help, and until we start stopping the bleeding of people moving into homelessness, encampment removals aren't going to help us. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to the last section of questions for the evening. These are direct from the audience. We're still going to stick to 2 minutes, but if you can answer them quicker, we get to more questions, more people get their questions answered and heard by everybody. So feel free to not take your whole time. So also, if you like, if you asked one of these questions, feel free to raise your hand. If you want to remain anonymous, that's okay too. I promise these came from the audience, not from anyone else. So, first question. Pedestrians and cyclists represent about 12% of street users in Boulder, but represent over 40% of the people injured in traffic crashes. This number has been steady since 2012. What should we do differently to protect our vulnerable road users?
This is, unlike my last answer, where I just said yes, or a couple answers back, this is one that would take hours and hours to talk about. We've already started talking about some of it tonight. Protected bike lanes, better crosswalk designs, better street designs, speed limits, like 20 is plenty. There's just a long, long list of things that we can do to make our pedestrians and our cyclists safer. As I said before, quoting Dave Adamson, people are squishy and cars are hard, and those interactions usually end up badly for the non-car participant. And so I think all of the above is my answer to this question. We spend a lot of time talking about how we can make our community safer for those who don't drive cars. We are not done there yet. As Erin said, we're moving towards Vision Zero. We need to be at Vision Zero. Our goal is to have, I know it's an aspirational goal, and we may never get there, but we're going to work really, really hard to have 0 serious injuries and fatalities in our community. Wouldn't that be a beautiful, beautiful community? And so we need to continue to look at ways to slow down cars and make cars more aware and alert to the fact that not everyone around them is driving. Thank you.
Thanks, we'll try to keep it a little shorter. We talked about that word earlier. This ought to help a lot in preventing and reducing severe injuries and crashes, because we use data to identify the riskiest places in the city with the highest rates, and those are the areas that we're trying to fix. As far as other things that we can do, I would love to see people stop doing right turns on red. That is a really dangerous thing. Even as a driver, I do not feel comfortable doing that, and I will be the annoying person getting honked at by everybody else because I do not like making right turns on red. Same with blinking yellow lights to turn left. Those are also dangerous, especially when they're crossing. We have lots of visitors to our town, lots of workers. They don't understand what multi-use paths are and the fact that people can go both ways. And there have been times during my work, there's one of these. I have been nearly hit multiple times by cars that didn't even know to look for somebody who was going in a direction they didn't expect on a multi-use path. And I think also slip lanes. I really do not like slip lanes. Those are terrible for a pedestrian and bicycle safety perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Those are good points. So we're working very, very hard on this. We've been talking about our Vision Zero plan several times, and we have a Vision Zero action plan that we adopted earlier this year. It goes from 2023 to 2027. I encourage you to download it and take a look at that. Lots of specific steps. And some of it gets really geeky, but this is where it matters, right? And Community Cycles has been a really good advocate in this area on like signal timing, right? And what signals happen and when they happen. And for example, we are discontinuing right turn on red at 8 major intersections in the city later this year as part of this action plan, right? But a lot of it is making sure that there's separate infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians, right? Have I mentioned there's a new protected intersection over here on 30th Street? But this is critically important. This is personal in my own family. My wife was hit by a car back in January while she was walking our dog. And thank goodness she's okay now, but it was really scary. And she broke her nose, she's bleeding all over the pavement. And it was because of street design. It was because of poor street design. And an inattentive driver, but in a well-designed street system, one inattentive driver who looks the wrong way for a couple seconds doesn't mean that somebody's bleeding down on the pavement. So we got to implement this action plan, and we got to take a look. What's the next step? This is a project that we're going to be working on for years, but it's people's lives are at stake. Do people know Trini Willerton from the It Could Be Me? Are people familiar with her work? She's on our transportation advisory board, was hit by a car, very terribly injured, and is now campaigning for cycling safety. So with all of these advocates, people in this room, and people like Trini, I know we'll get there, right? It's critically important. Thanks.
Thank you again. I'm going to throw in a quick question since I am a member of the audience, and this should take a very, very, very short amount of time to answer. So, in the last year, how many hours approximately have you been on a bike? And as a follow-up, have you ever been in an accident with a vehicle while on a bike? Crash. Sorry, crash.
I do not know how to do that calculation, Adam. I was trying to think about just all the places I go to in a day, especially campaigning, and it's a lot. I really do. So I got an e-bike over the summer, so I've been using that to replace a ton of car trips, and it's great fun. It makes me feel like I'm 6 again. It's a lot of fun to be out there. So mostly every day I'm recovering from COVID, and that has made me tired, and so tonight I chose to drive rather than ride my bike because I wasn't quite sure that I could make it without falling over on the way home. But generally, other than that, I'm on my bike most days when I am out and about.
Have you crashed?
Oh, crash! No, I'm sorry, I have not experienced a crash with a vehicle. Some really close calls.
I mean, countless. I don't even know how I calculate that. I'm riding my e-bike to so very many things, including to the forum here tonight. And by the way, what I sacrifice by doing that is not bringing any campaign signs. So if you want a campaign sign, hit me up personally, I'll get one delivered to you. But I bike all over town as much as I can. Looking forward to biking to the opening of the new protected intersection that's happening just over here tomorrow. And in all of that time, I've been very fortunate to never have a crash with a vehicle. Boy, those close calls. I remember one time I was on Broadway on a little narrow bikeway coming down the hill, and this truck was like just edging into me. Thank goodness they didn't edge all the way over, but we've all had those really scary moments. Fortunately, it's never come to an actual incident. Thanks.
I retired 12 years ago. Before I retired, I worked down in Broomfield, and I did drive my car down to Broomfield. And when I retired 12 years ago on my 50th birthday, what my pledge to my birthday present to myself was that I would strive never to drive my car more than 500 miles per year, 500 miles a year. And I keep those records of that. And in the 12 years since I retired, I've driven my car a total of 5,000 miles, a little less than 500 a year. And I want to continue to do that. I like to walk a lot of places. Walking is healthy. I need to lose a little bit more weight, so I need to do more walking. I like to ride my bike. I like to ride my little scooter, a little moped scooter. That's how I actually got, I was in an accident, and that's how I got this. I actually got a scooter that, thank you for that. I'm usually pretty good about that, but I got a little emotional for a second. In the collision with a car, and that's how I got, and the concussion was rushed to the emergency room. Sam Weaver was there at my bedside. That's who I woke up to Sam Weaver, like, oh, well, thank you for being here. And so, I lost my plot. What's that? Sam Weaver, what a great guy. I wish Sam was here tonight.
Have you been in a crash?
Yes, I have been in a crash. I have been in a crash.
On a bicycle?
It actually was on a scooter at that time. It was on a scooter at that time. I don't think I've been in a crash on a bicycle, at least not a serious one, but this was a pretty nasty one. And I was a concussion and it was a bad situation. Who here has been in a crash involving a bicycle? Yeah. Oh, that's way too many. Way too many. And how many of those have involved cars? Almost everyone. Or a bus? Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here with us. Thank you so much. I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you all for indulging my quick question. Next question from the audience. When bike infrastructure is proposed, some neighbors and some businesses often worry about parking. What would you propose Boulder do to reduce parking and demand for parking, specifically for vehicles? I would, yes.
Me? Yeah, so this is something that we need to work on from a lot of different perspectives. Let's give it up for Representative Judy Amabile where she heads out here. Do we still have Jimmy Joseph here? The Representative and Councilmember Jimmy Joseph was here as well. Yeah, so we definitely need, I talked earlier about how we need to reform our antiquated parking requirements, and when new developments come in, we do give away reductions like candy on Halloween, so we're pretty permissive in that way, but the fact that people have to ask limits them, and also oftentimes people don't ask, they're like, well, maybe I won't get approved, so I won't ask for a reduction, or I won't ask for much of a reduction, and to move towards that sustainable future that I'm talking about, this climate-friendly, livable future that we need less parking. A lot less parking. So this is something I'm very interested in tackling in the next council term, if you'll be so good as to vote for me, is to work on reducing our requirements and imposing more parking maximums rather than minimums. And then part of that, of course, is making sure that we have the infrastructure that we've all been talking about tonight, right? Like if you can safely walk or bike to your destination, then that's something that you're much more likely to do, and it means you don't need that car parking spot when you arrive at your destination. The other part, can we just say we need better bike racks around town? Oh my goodness. Right? I think we do pretty well on new developments. We have good bike parking requirements, but for some of the older ones, there's no retrofit requirements. And there's nothing I hate more than biking somewhere and there's like zero bike parking. I'm going to a traffic sign, which is probably illegal. And so anyway, better bike parking is important in terms of reducing car parking. So lots of things to work on here, but it's something we can definitely make progress on.
You know, if we were to rate like the top 5 stupidest laws that we have in Boulder, the parking minimum would make that list. Maybe on the top of that list. It's pretty high up there. And as Aaron said, almost every developer comes into us and says, I know I'm supposed to park it to 60 cars because of the number of units, but I'm only parking it at 45, is that okay? And we always waive it. We always say, sure, that's fine. As a matter of fact, every once in a while, someone will come in and will actually park it to what the law says. And then we say to them, why didn't you ask for a waiver? And talk about a dumb law. It's a law that's honored in the breach. We never ever require people to park at the crazy numbers. That law must have been written back when the car was came back in the 1950s or 60s, because it's a vestige of a bygone era. And I hope that the very first thing, whoever's on council next time, I hope the very first thing we do is just get rid of that stupid parking minimum, because it serves no purpose whatsoever. It's always waived. When they don't ask for it, we reduce it anyway. use. Thanks.
Thanks. I agree with everybody about getting rid of the parking maximums, and it will be on council regardless, so totally gonna go for that. Hopefully some of the candidates will be on board with that as well. I really would like us to think about setting some like parking guidelines for new developers and folks as well, to do that in more areas so that we have more places to park bikes. I think that's part of it, is just creating infrastructure that's going to help people get off of our dependency on cars. And we can do that, especially when we are building our transportation corridors for universal design, where we're really thinking beyond ADA accessibility, and we're starting to think about how do we create transportation corridors for people who have mental illness, or who are dealing with neurological disorders, or something like sensory processing disorder, where you may not want to walk on a really busy corridor. There are ways that we can design so that things are universally accessible, and I think that's how we start helping people not even want to have a car anymore. And then, of course, decreasing the need for cars by making some more land use changes that allow people to live closer to where they work and play. I think that's another way we can get to people not using cars or asking for cars quite as much.
All right. Still up? No. No, down to 0 battery. I'll just talk now. All right. So we're down to the last couple questions. First of all, what is the most radical new bike idea for Boulder you are going to fight for on our roads or mountain bike trails that doesn't mean a radical jump? Should have landed harder.
Unicycles. I'm not sure I understand the question. What are you trying to get at there?
So what I'm
By the way, I do ride a unicycle.
I
do.
What I'm
Got
trying
a
to
flat
get
tire
at
right now.
is whatever the audience member was trying to get at.
Okay, audience member, can you clarify your question?
How much pissed off other people are you willing to go?
Oh, yeah, we can.
I think that's probably.
Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, we're professional disappointers. We're really, really good at pissing off people. As a matter of fact, our goal is to piss off as many people on a Thursday night as possible. And sometimes we succeed in doing all that. I think there's a tension between leadership and representation. And sometimes we do what the majority urges us to do, and oftentimes we do what the majority doesn't want us to do, and that's perfectly fine. I don't know if I am brilliant enough to whip a radical idea on my butt right now. So I'll just say that as you have radical ideas and you want to bring them forward, please do. Don't be shy about that. Thank you.
Thank you. People usually tell me I'm pretty radical, so trying to think of what to say here that you all haven't heard me say before. I think maybe I'm going to surprise people and say that one of the things that I would really like to see is actually better enforcement of keeping some of our bike paths and sidewalks and things clear. It really is an issue for folks, especially who have mobility impairments. If there is snow or ice or something that is blocking the sidewalk, it's creating a real safety risk. And I would like us to think about what we're doing there to prevent blockages. I've heard from some folks, especially who are wheelchair users, for whom the Lime scooters, which really are wonderful, I love micromobility, but when they are blocking a sidewalk and you have someone who's in a wheelchair, they cannot get out to get rid of that scooter, to move it to a place that they can get through. So we really need to be thinking about what does it look like to do a better job of keeping our sidewalks and walkways clear. What does it look like to do a better job of keeping our bike paths and things clear in the winter as well, especially in the winter, but also just from debris. It accumulates, right? After a rain or something like that. I crashed on my bike. It was not with a car, it was with a pile of sand that I did not see just a few weeks ago. My back tire slid right out from under me, took me off of being able to ride my bike for about 2 weeks. So those kinds of things really make a difference as we're trying to move people to encourage them to use more of the paths that we have around town. Thank you.
Oh, we're down to. All right, I can use my outside voice. How about that? Can people hear me? Well, I'll say a couple things. So number one, I would say that I would like to see us make so many cycling and pedestrian safety and infrastructure improvements that no one perceives them as radical whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then for one particular idea, I will say that if people bike from the university to downtown, right, on that multi-use path along the east side of Broadway, and it goes through the Arboretum, right, which isn't much of an arboretum at all, then it's a kind of dark, it's unsafe, you know, and it's windy, it's not good for bikes, the turns are too tight. What I would love to see is like a flying multi-use path, right? So something, think about like the ones that CU has built over the last few years further east along the creek path, is something that would go from the conference center and have this beautiful arching thing with a lovely view and get you right safely into downtown.
Yeah.
So there's my radical. Put the gondola thing on your bingo card.
All right, we're gonna ask one more. I'm actually gonna go to this one. In terms of the amount of resources allocated to new bike infrastructure and maintenance of the last 20-year-old, maintenance of the 20-year-old existing infrastructure, would you describe Boulder as very pro-bike, kind of pro-bike, neutral to bikes, anti-bike?
And I'll add a caveat, because that was my question. A lot of great ideas, a lot of good existing stuff, very little maintenance, very little dollars to keep it up, very little enforcement. How do you fix that?
And I'll repeat, very pro-bike, kind of pro-bike, neutral to bikes, anti-bike, in terms of maintenance. Good.
I'm so sorry, folks. I have to work my voice on. Is there anybody who cannot hear me?
Yeah, you should use the microphone.
I think
That makes sense.
Okay.
I am going to try my best.
She's gonna try her best.
Our voice. I'm telling my kids something. I'm into the London. So as far as, resources to new bike infrastructure, so this is going to be a challenge. One of the things we're heading into in the next 5 to 6 years is a really constrained budget. We do not have extra money. So as we are looking to do new things, we are going to have to pull from things that we are already doing and cut back on those in order to do it. And I think the way that I would approach that question is with a lot of community engagement to help us understand what are the different impacts on the community of different decisions that we may make. What are the highest priority areas for us to be thinking about when we're talking about improvements? But as far as where we're at, we have so many bike paths, and many of them are not maintained that well, and it makes it really hard to get around on a bike. And so, how do we think about doing more with less? And how do we think about what we're prioritizing for which communities and spaces we're prioritizing for that becomes a really hard question. And so we are actually heading into a budget discussion this Thursday, and if anybody would like to come and advocate for more funding there is still time to sign up for that public hearing to be able to do that. But our new budgeting process that is very outcomes-based should help us identify where we have pockets of money that are going toward programs that are not working as well as we would like them to, and reinvest them into programs that are working, that are creating more transportation options for our community. Long term, we may need to look at some alternative mechanism of funding because they're only getting harder and more expensive.
And Nicole, would you say very pro-bike? Neutral. Okay, perfect.
Neutral is kind of
Well, I'll say kind of pro-bike, because I do know that this city very much believes in cycling. The city government believes in cycling. Our transportation department highly prioritizes cycling and our planning and our maintenance and such. But we are not where we need to be. There's no question, right? So we're not doing what we need to be doing on the maintenance side and on the construction side. So we do make progress here and there. Like, for example, does anybody here ride the path behind the North Boulder Recreation Center by Roy Gardens? Right? Do you remember what that used to be like? Right? And it's this beautiful new concrete paved thing from a couple of years ago. I was so happy the first time I rode that. Right, so we do make progress on certain things, but we also have a really large path system that is deteriorating, and we gotta do better on maintenance. You know, the good news is that Boulder is one of the best cities for cycling in the country. But the bad news is that when you compare us to our European counterparts, we're nowhere close to those metrics and where we should be and where we need to be. As regular cyclists, we all see the gaps and what's missing, right? So we need to keep making that commitment to improvements on the system and on maintenance every step of the way. It's critically important. Thanks.
I'm going to agree with Aaron. I think we're pretty pro-bike. Now, there's a big difference between intention and execution, right? Well, when it comes to execution, I think we're not so good. But we are pro-bike. The city staff is pro-bike. The city council is pro-bike. I think where we fall down is in taking that and talk about this. There's something called, this is a really wonky group, called the Colorado Asphalt Association. Believe it or not, it really is. What a fun group of people. And they go around to the cities and they rate the quality of the bike lanes and the streets in all the cities in Colorado. They do it on a 100-point scale. The last time they tested Boulder, which I think was a year or two ago, came in at 77. That's not horrible, it's not great. There's a city, I think it's Sheridan, Colorado, I don't know who that is, that's a 97. It must be like, it must be beautiful. Smooth, no bumps, no potholes, no obstacles. 77 is not good enough. I'd like it to be well in the 80s and 90s. Because you know what it is? The potholes are horrible, the roads are in bad condition, and you're constantly with your head down, right? You're constantly dodging the potholes. You should have your head up, watching those cars that might crash into you, and also enjoying the beautiful environment you have here. And so I am fully in favor of increasing our pavement management funding. I was talking to Natalie Stifler, the head of transportation, on Friday. We were kicking around the idea, I'm going to use the T word, that maybe we should have a special designated tax, dedicated tax, just for pavement management, so that we can always know that those dollars we can be there to raise our number from 77 to a much better. Thank you.
And to save everyone their time and their voices, we're going to end there. I want to thank all the candidates for attending this evening, giving their time to us, the community. I've done this job, I'm not the mayor, but the council. It is not easy. It is generally not that fun. It is certainly underpaid. So please give them a round of applause. Thank you all for attending tonight and, holding them accountable. This is the best time to do it, so get in their faces now because it's a little bit harder when they're actually seated. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Stay home.